Hello, my name's Jason. I'm a creative person, but I also have an INTP personality type. And today I want to talk about why that can be a bit difficult for me. So, in case you don't know, the INTP personality type basically means that I'm an introvert intuitive, which leads to a few problems. So the biggest thing about being a creative and an INTP is that obviously I love creating stuff. I love the creative process, and the stuff I've created, I like to put it out into the world. I sort of like to have that. I like to have that feeling that I'm actually, not just existing in a bubble doing something as a hobby, but I'm kind of sharing what I'm creating. But that kind of clashes with the introverted part of my personality, because the problem is I like putting my work out there, but then inevitably on the internet, putting stuff on the internet, inevitably you're going to get critics, regardless of what you do. You could post a picture of 3 kittens in a wicker basket and somebody will complain that the kittens aren't fluffy enough for them. It's just the way of the internet. So inevitably, things that I've created in the past have got criticism. As an example, about 10 years ago, I started programming games for mobile phones. I would put it on Google Play and I'd put it on the Apple App Store to sell. And people were buying it, and I was making, I wouldn't say comfortable living or a reasonable living, but I was sort of making enough to pay the bills. And then obviously, because Google Play offers a refund facility on there, they'll play the game, realise they don't like it, ask for a refund, and then leave a comment telling you why they didn't like it. Now for me, being a generally introverted person, I find that criticism very hard to take. Even the criticism I'll probably receive for this video, I find hard to take. So it would be very difficult on a store like Google Play, because you're obviously selling something for money, you're making money from it. So Google expects you to obviously interact with your customers. So they're basically encouraging you to read the reviews and leave replies to the reviews. If somebody says something bad, then you're expected to go in and say, oh sorry you didn't like the game or something. You basically have to take, as the seller, you have to take the kind of the humble, submissive position and just admit you were wrong if somebody didn't like the game because they didn't read the description. You can't really go in there and be and be a bit snipey and say, well, it clearly stated in the description that this and that and that, so I don't know why you were surprised when this and that and that. You have to say, oh, sorry, perhaps I didn't make it clear enough or something. And it's the same thing on, let's say YouTube, for instance. If you post a video on YouTube, you keep getting notifications on your main sort of studio hub saying, these are comments that you haven't responded to. And it's almost forcing you to engage with them, because engagement helps your video rank better. So however much you might want to avoid some of these comments, the owner of the site is sort of forcing you to look at them. And like I say, for somebody with my particular personality type, that can be a problem. Because for me personally, like I say, when I made one game, I'd be working on it for maybe a month, 6 weeks, and then it would maybe it would make money for about the first month. You'd make money mainly due to the way that Google Play would promote new games for the first 30 days. So you'd get a bit of a push for 30 days, and then after that, the revenue would sort of tail off a bit because less people were discovering the game. So it was sort of always important, as soon as you finished one game, you had to be sort of working on the next one. You really had to get back to the creative side. Once that game went on the market, it was back into full-on creative mode to try and get the next thing out. But the problem is, at the same time, you then had the customer support side of of that first game that you had to deal with. So what I would find myself doing, I would get up in the morning, I would go into Google Play, and I would obviously get notifications of reviews and things, and I'd have to go in and look at these reviews. And what I'd find sometimes is that if people left a bad review, a negative review, criticising something about that game, which I'd spent several weeks of my life, and then several weeks doesn't sound that much when big studios spend years working on games, but still a few weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever I spend working on that game is still a lot of my time, during which time I'm trying to pay bills, I'm trying to do other things. So when somebody criticises that, for me personally, it would be devastating, and my motivation would take a knock, and as soon as my motivation takes a knock, my sort of creativity drains away. So it was very difficult to get up in the morning, read negative reviews, and then have to go into creative mode for the rest of the day, and try and be creative in something and try and feel motivated about it. When you've just had somebody slagging off the last thing you did, then you sort of start thinking to yourself, well, why am I doing this? Because I'm just going to get criticised again. Perhaps I should just keep it to myself rather than making it public. You suddenly become very, well, let's say very scared really of making your work public, because you believe that ultimately it's going to end up sort of hurting you in some way, mentally by making your work public. So it's a very difficult thing to deal with. On the one hand, you have that desire to create and show your work to people, and but on the other side, you don't want to make yourself a target for criticism. Now, obviously, I can already think of what some of the comments would be to this, or what people would think about what I'm saying here. You get the people who would say, well, if you're putting your work public, then you just need to grow a thicker skin. That's always a common one. But the problem is, you can't grow a thicker skin if that's your personality type. Which is why people start to take avoidance measures and just basically stop looking at stuff. It's why you see people on YouTube post videos and they just turn the comments off, because they know that comments are classed as engagement by YouTube and that would help their video, but they just don't want to deal with it, so they switch the comments off and just don't have anything to do with it. And it's why people delete social media accounts, because they just want to avoid that feedback. And the other comment people obviously make is that, oh, well, you're just one of these people who wants to create stuff and have everybody love you for what you create. Well, no, it's not really a case of that. Obviously, I would like it if everybody liked what I do. I mean, that's my intention as a creator. I don't think anybody creates something with the mindset that, oh, I'm going to make this and I hope everybody hates it. You're sort of making something you feel proud of, and that's why you're revealing it to the world, because you feel proud of it. So yeah, so it's not a case of wanting everybody to love me. I accept that some people aren't going to like it, and I accept that those people have the right to critique. That's a sort of a given right is the right to critique and the right to have an opinion and the right to offer feedback. And I don't deny anybody that. All I'm addressing here is my inability to cope with that critique. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm not saying that people shouldn't critique and that everybody should just love me. I'm just talking about my personal difficulty with dealing with it. And with that in mind, you can understand why when people get to a certain level of fame or a certain level of income, they will hire a PR person who runs their social media for them. Or if you're working as a creative in a bigger company, then there's a PR department or there's a customer support department who are there to handle those those comments and that feedback, and they can filter out the nasty stuff. If it's constructive criticism, then they can let that through. But if it's just real nasty stuff, then they can filter that out before the artiste gets exposed to it. And like I say, this is just talking about my personal feelings on this because of my personality type as an INTP, as a introvert who doesn't respond well to criticism. That's just me. There are other personality types who love criticism, and you'll see these people giving advice, and they'll say, "Oh, you should welcome the negative comments because they tell you what you need to fix. And if you take in all these negative comments, and then you incorporate them into whatever you make next, then the next thing's going to be even more perfect, and more people are going to love it." And they sort of paint it as though over time you're going to get so much better and better that in the end you're going to create the perfect thing because you've listened to all this negativity until there's just nothing left for people to be negative about, and it's like the ultimate perfect thing you've created. But that's never going to happen because there are people who like strawberry ice cream and there are people who like chocolate ice cream, and you're never going to be able to create something perfectly in the middle that everybody likes. So by trying to make something perfect for one group of people, you could be completely alienating a different group of people. So I think it's kind of not necessarily a good idea to just say that feedback is going to be perfect, or to say that negative feedback is good and you should just read it and take it all to heart. I don't think that's the answer. There are people who do love that sort of thing. There are people who have that personality where they can deal with that. There are people who love living their life through checklists. They like nothing more than having a checklist that they can just tick things off and say, okay, if I've done that, okay, I've ticked that off, and so that will be all right, and I've ticked that off, and that will be all right, and I've ticked that off. And as long as they've gone through the checklist and they've ticked off all these wants and needs of everybody in the whole world, then they're happy that what they've created is perfect because they've satisfied the checklist. But my personality isn't like that. I don't like working to checklists. I like being a little bit more off the wall and a little bit more sort of chaotic with what I'm creating. So again, inevitably, there are going to be people who don't like what you're doing. But for me to feel ultimately happy inside, I need to be creating the way I want to create. Because if I start trying to create by checklist or by committee, that's not going to make me happy. And if the creation process isn't making me happy, then I don't want to be doing it. Why be doing that if it's not making me happy? So ultimately, as a creative and an INTP, I have to accept that what I'm going to create is not necessarily going to be perfect for everybody. And somehow or other, I have to cope with that negativity that comes in. And it can hurt me. It can put me off for the day. I've had days when I've read some negative comments and then just sat there and not done any work for the rest of the day because I just think I can't motivate myself to work for the rest of that day because I'm just thinking, is it worth it? I sit there thinking, perhaps I should change and do something else then, because clearly what I've just done isn't working for people. It's not serving its purpose. So perhaps I'm on completely the wrong path here, and it can completely derail me for a whole day, sometimes a couple of days. So it's a difficulty. Like I say, I'm not here to say woe is me, or to say what a hard life I've got, or that everybody should love me. I'm just basically giving an honest glimpse into my personality. And for people who don't have the same personality type as me, they might find it difficult to understand. They might think that I'm some kind of soft-skinned snowflake, well, that's up to them. Unfortunately, people who don't have my personality will never understand what it's like to have my personality. That's why the world is filled with different people. You know, some people can empathise with different groups, some people can't. But I'll never change those people's mind, whatever I say. So, you know, it's just me being honest. At the end of that, that's all I can say. This is just me being honest about how I feel and how things make me feel. And you know what I say, as long as you're honest and you're telling the truth as it pertains to you, then nobody can disagree with that, because it's your personal truth, and that's a fact. The way I feel is a fact, so nobody can argue. Nobody can say that I don't feel that way, because that's the truth. So anyway, if you found this video useful, then please give it a like. Please leave a comment if you've got something to say. Hopefully a good comment, because if it's a negative comment, then I will probably do my best to just avoid it and not bother reading it. But you know, if it's a nice comment, then I always appreciate it. So, and you know, subscribe to the channel if you want to support me, if you want to, you know, make me feel that my creativity is in some way worthy and useful, then please subscribe, and I'll appreciate it. And until next time, take it easy, take care, bye for now.